Welcome to the Midnight Vigil, the channel where the stars are always right and there really is a monster hiding underneath your bed. Today we're going to talk about what in the world is going on with the Friday the 13th the game. So if you followed any of the news recently, you've seen on Twitter, you've seen online that Gun Media, the publisher and the developer, Gun Media and Illfonic have announced that Friday the 13th will not be receiving any new content. It won't be getting any new DLC because the ongoing legal battle over the Friday the 13th film rights is spilling over into the game world, and these legal issues are going to prevent them from making anything new. So, this isn't particularly new. If you've been following what's been going on with the films, it's essentially, I'll try to make a long story short. The reason why we haven't gotten a new Friday the 13th film since the reboot in 2009, which, we are pretty much 9 years later and we haven't had a single movie, is because the people that own the film rights have been engaged in this protracted legal battle, this dispute over who has the IP, who owns the characters. It's a big he said, she said, but recently, as it pertains to the video game, Victor Miller, who is the original script writer, is claiming that he created the Jason Voorhees character, but only in that Jason Voorhees is a little boy who is killed by the negligence of the counselors, and he's sort of engaged in this lawsuit between Sean Cunningham, the director of the original film. Sean Cunningham says, yes, okay, we don't dispute that you created Jason as a little boy, but your version of Friday the 13th had the mother, Pamela Voorhees. She's the villain of the first film. Spoilers, I guess, for, a 40-year-old franchise. Spoilers. Your version of Friday the 13th is different because we sequelized it and we developed Jason to be who he is now, the iconic machete-wielding hockey mask killer. So they're in this long legal battle. It's kind of ironic in a sense. You have this film franchise that's been going on for forever, and Jason is this immortal killer, and all it took to stop him was a couple of clever lawyers. But essentially, so let's just go through the reaction. Usually I do these, I'll talk about the history, I'll give you my impressions, and we'll talk about the legacy. But since this is ongoing, we're just going to skip into talking about how the reaction is. So, of course, Friday the 13th was kickstarted. There's a little bit of controversy in the comments section where people are talking about, hey, I've paid to have my name in the credits. I still haven't gotten that. This is before the news broke out that the game was not going to get any new DLC. So that's an ongoing issue. But specifically, I want to show you the Friday the 13th subreddit. People are very unhappy. They're talking about getting refunds. This is actually interesting. So the rights, this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a while. This is from an interview last year, right after the game's launch, where Horror Inc. were talking about the ongoing battle and how Victor Miller, the original writer, his claim wouldn't be affecting Gun Media's video game Friday the 13th the game. And they spoke about this a couple of times. I had heard about this last year, about how, again, pretty much what I told you, he doesn't own Jason as he is now. He didn't create the name Friday the 13th, so he wouldn't be able to control how the IP is used, going forward. So far as I know, he did come up with the Voorhees name. He did come up with the Jason name, but again, there's a dispute here because he doesn't own this, how the IP came to be known. I suppose they could change the name and as long as you still have the chicha caca noise and you still have the Friday the 13th branding and the hockey mask, I don't really think it would matter. You could pretty much call Jason Voorhees anything. His name isn't important. It's what he does that's important. But people have been furious. This is interesting. So the main point of this video is we can talk a little bit about, and this is that article talking from last summer. We can talk about how this game isn't going to be getting any new players, but I want to show you the graphs of the information. We're going to go to SteamDB. I want to show you how this game has been doing. It may surprise you, but if you've been following this game and how it's been trending, I mean, this is terrible. This peak is pretty good, but this is from last summer when the game launched. This is terrible right now. For the weekend yesterday, it was about 390. Saturday night, it was about 300 players on. Professional reviewers didn't like it, but Steam, for some reason, if we look at Steam, it's mostly positive, 20,000 reviews over its lifespan, but the recent reviews are mixed. That doesn't really surprise me, considering people will review bomb games to punish developers. And then, they've announced that they were going to do DLC and they're not doing it. People are upset, obviously. But what I really want to talk about, the crux of this video, is I don't want to be totally hyperbolic and say that this game is dead, because obviously it still has a dedicated fan base that are going to play it. But the problem with this game is you have this franchise that you can draw from, which is great. 11 films, I want to say. And they're doing DLC based on the different incarnations of Jason. They're doing map packs. They're adding in iconic characters from the franchise. That's good. That's how you keep your player base engaged, because on the technical side, they still haven't done dedicated servers, which they're saying they're going to do. But you need to give your player base a reason to continue to be engaged. So this is a serious problem in this game, because now that you can't do any new DLC, the game is pretty much as it is. Nothing new will be added. There will be no new versions of Jason, so Jason X is canceled. The new maps that they were working on can't come out. New characters, new skins, new environments, stuff like that. The kill animations that they were working on, that's not going to be coming out. The problem with this, and that another game that I'm going to contrast Friday the 13th with, is if you take a look at Dead by Daylight is consistently one of the most popular games on Steam. It has thousands and thousands of players that play it every day. The difference is that Dead by Daylight can draw from original characters, it can draw from licensed characters. That game has a continued source of income, it has a continued source of DLC to engage its audience with. Just this summer, Dead by Daylight is going to be celebrating its 2-year anniversary, and they're showing off the new clown character, the new survivor, the new map. They've got all these things that are coming, and that's how you keep a multiplayer player base engaged. You need to keep releasing content at a reasonable rate, otherwise the player base is going to move on. With Friday the 13th, you are making a game based on one franchise. You're eventually going to run out of new ways that Jason can kill people, or new ways that counselors can run around on maps and get killed. Eventually, you can only do that idea so many times. With Dead by Daylight, they already have Michael Myers, they have Fred Krueger, they have the pig killer from the Saw franchise. They have these licensed characters. What's he called? Leatherface. They have Leatherface. So they have these licensed killers that bring in audiences. I got the game right around when Michael Myers was added, and it was a perfect time to jump on. I was excited. Halloween's a big franchise. Lots of people have a lot of nostalgia for it. When you release licensed killers, you go mainstream, you go viral. Modern news sites are going to talk about how this is being added. It's good publicity. And Dead by Daylight also has its own original line of killers. Some of them are based off of folklore, like the Doctor. The other ones are original creations. But the thing here is Dead by Daylight is going to have new things to look forward to. Friday the 13th already has a lower player base. This negative publicity isn't helpful at all. There won't be any new DLC coming out. You'd have to think eventually the player base is just going to hemorrhage. People are going to move on. Why would I play Friday the 13th where you can only play as Jason, you can only play as a counselor, when I could go to another multiplayer game? I could go to Dead by Daylight. I can play as all these different killers that have different play styles, all these survivors that have different perks and abilities. Yeah, you're doing the same thing. You're doing the generator thing over and over again, but the killers and the maps all play differently. And the game is so popular, the developers are continually developing for it. I don't have to fear that suddenly there's going to be a lawsuit that's going to shut down the game. You know, I feel safely rewarded for my investment in Dead by Daylight. With Friday the 13th, I don't really feel like, how can new players come into this game when they know what's going on? Why would anyone purchase this game right now? I don't really understand. On the personal side of things, I did end up playing Friday the 13th. I got about 2 hours of playtime with it. It went on sale. I either got it last summer or last winter. I don't really remember. But I played it with a couple of friends, and we weren't crazy about it. We had connectivity issues. There weren't dedicated servers. I have a notoriously laggy internet. It goes in, it goes out. So I didn't have a good time. I thought the gameplay was interesting, I guess. I liked the community aspect. You could talk with people. I liked how it had a different pace than Dead by Daylight. Definitely Friday the 13th felt more horror, whereas Dead by Daylight feels almost like a competitive multiplayer game. I liked how they felt different, but I didn't have a good time with Friday the 13th, and we ended up refunding it, all of us. And the game rarely goes on sale, so it's kind of ironic. We were thinking about jumping back in this summer, just to see how things had changed, because they've done some new things with it. The single player objective-based thing. They were talking about the new animations, the new Jason incarnations. So we were talking about jumping back in, but this game never goes on sale. I think even when it was on sale, it was 30 something bucks when we got it. It was not what I would call a deep discount. And even now, I don't understand why I would want to buy a game when I know that nothing new is going to be added to it. They can do bug fixes, you can do patches, you can fix the technical side of the game, but if no one's buying it and no one's playing it, and you're essentially a multiplayer-only game, yeah, okay, you can play offline with bots, which is good, but the engagement in the community is coming from the multiplayer aspect of the game. What do you really have for me to look forward to? It's not, I don't think it's their fault, but you're going to take a look. Let's see. A lot of people are saying that this statement is indicative of Gun Media knowing that this was coming and sort of stringing players along. And you see this conspiracy on Reddit, specifically here, where people are talking about how they're carrying on here because they just don't want to develop the game anymore. I've seen this on Steam. I'm seeing this on Twitter. Obviously, I've seen it on this subreddit, and I've seen it on other subreddits where people are talking about that this just seems so convenient. The timing feels so wrong. People are accusing Gun Media of throwing Victor Miller under the bus because they're deflecting. They're using the lawsuit as an excuse to cut ties with the game and to move on. I don't really buy into that totally, because they've announced their plans. They had a roadmap of sorts for what they wanted to do. If I was going to cut ties and I wanted to leave my multiplayer base high and dry, I don't really think I would invest in new content, spend money on animating, spend the money. They were spending money on these things. It doesn't really make sense to me that they would invest in a product and then conveniently just stop making it. this is anecdotal evidence, but I was reading on another article that this game has sold 2 million copies essentially in its initial release window last summer, which is an incredible investment for, at that time it was a digital only product. So after Steam and Sony and Microsoft took their cut, you'd have to imagine that Gun Media made a very healthy profit off of the game. It was profitable. They got their investment back. They made some money. I don't really think they ever found a community, in my opinion. You have a couple hundred players that have stuck with it, but they certainly didn't hit the numbers that Dead by Daylight hit. And when Dead by Daylight came out, initially they didn't really have licensed content. That came later. And even initially, Dead by Daylight hit a big audience pretty quickly. I don't really think it ever took off the way that they wanted it to, but it's tough for me to totally buy this story. I haven't been convinced in the game. It launched in a state that made me unhappy. All the bugs, all the glitches, the connectivity issues. I have friends, again, anecdotal stuff, but I have friends that own it on console, and the patches take so long, and it feels like the community on consoles has moved on a lot quicker than the PC community did. It just seemed like the game was, to be hyperbolic, dead on arrival. It launched with competition across the road from Dead by Daylight, and I don't ever really think it recovered. But this is a big conspiracy. Did they know this was coming? Are they doing this on purpose? I know that they were talking about, Gun Media we're going to move on, and they were hiring to work on another project, and they were going to do their own original stuff. That was a story that came out a couple of months ago. They said then that it wouldn't impact the Friday the 13th team. I don't have a reason to not believe that. Developers can certainly focus on one project and develop their own stuff on the side. You see it all the time with the big publishers. But with this team, I mean, it's a very unhappy situation. Steam, in the Steam discussions, people are talking about, is this class action lawsuit worthy? Can the Kickstarter people come back and sue for false advertising? Because a lot of the things that they were promised in the initial Kickstarter backer roadmap will never be delivered now. Is this false advertising? Of course, I don't think that's ever going to go anywhere, because Kickstarter has a weird terms of service where you're paying money to people, but they don't really have to deliver the product. You've seen that happen in other projects, so I wouldn't expect that to go anywhere. But this is certainly not what this game needed. They just hit their 1-year anniversary at the end of last month. This is not the publicity that this game needed. And we're about to go into the Steam sale. It's a bad look. This is not good on any front. What player base is there wanted this new content. If there was a player base that would have been interested in the new content, now that's not going to happen. It's just a very unhappy situation. I saw some speculation on Steam and on this subreddit where, let's just imagine the absolute worst, where what if the worst, assuming that you're believing one side of the narrative in the lawsuit, but let's assume Victor Miller does get claim over the Jason character and he wins the whole rights, or at least part of them. Wouldn't Gun Media essentially just have to pay him a licensing fee and include him in the credits of the game? What's kind of sad is, no, that's not it. Here it is. What's sad is his Twitter is, of course, private now, and you can see he, of course, mentions Friday the 13th. This is his new horror movie. His account is protected, so people on both sides, this is totally he said, she said. One side is saying Gun Media are sending their angry fans after this guy. Sean Cunningham is saying you had a work for hire contract. You were working for the WGA. You have no right over the ownership of this. You got paid for a job. We moved on. You haven't been involved in this franchise since the first film. You claiming ownership over the whole thing is just a farce. Victor Miller, obviously, I'm assuming he wants to have a legacy. He wants to leave something behind. He wants, if he has to believe that he has ownership. This has to do with the Copyright Act of '76. I mean, it's complicated, but it is he said, she said, and both sides are very unhappy. But we do games, we do horror movies here. This is why we're not getting a new Friday the 13th movie anytime soon, and this is why we're not going to be getting any Friday the 13th the game content anytime soon. Um, it sucks. I don't really have any new, like, any hope to offer anyone because the court case is still going on. I I know that these things tend to drag out for a long time. I mean, we were talking about this lawsuit last year, and here we are this summer, and it's still going on. You'd have to hope that when this gets resolved, we'll know what's going on, but it could go either way. It's in the hands of the court now. The judge is going to have to decide whether he thinks one side is right over the other. You know, we'll just have to see. But anyways, this is a huge story that blew up out of nowhere. This came out right during the beginnings of E3, when all of the E3 news was going on. It's not a good look, but I figured I would finally cover it. It's been a couple of days, and people are still pissed off. But it's bad news. Anyways, guys, that's it. I've rambled on long enough. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe. If you have a Twitter account, you can follow me at Midnight Vigil. That's it for now. Thank you, and I will see you next time.